Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we're unpacking one of the most tragic, fascinating, and honestly, fundamentally misunderstood stories in modern gaming lore. If you're familiar with the Dark Souls universe, you definitely know about the Witch of Izalith and those terrifying demons roaming the dark corners of Lordran. But what if I told you that almost everything we think we know about her and her monstrous offspring is actually clouded by a massive translation error? Seriously. The story we got in the West is all about panic and a freak accident. But the real story, hidden in the original Japanese text, it's a calculated, arrogant, scientific endeavor that literally birthed an entire civilization.
Okay, let's dive into this, because I really want to challenge your preconceived notions right out of the gate. We usually think of the demons of Lordran, the Capra demons, the Taurus demons, all those feral beasts guarding ruined cities, as just mindless, corrupted monsters that we need to wipe out. But when we take a hard, investigative look at the original Japanese text, a completely different reality emerges. We aren't just looking at random video game enemies here, we're looking at the remnants of a highly structured society that suffered a horrific, self-inflicted tragedy. To really understand how we got here, though, we have to start at the very foundation of this world. Section 1. The First Flame and the Power of Disparity.
So, in the overarching universe of Dark Souls, the absolute fundamental power source is the First Flame. Before it even existed, we had the Age of Ancients. It was just this unformed world covered in fog, ruled by everlasting dragons. There was no life, no death, no light, and no dark. But then, with fire, came disparity. During this time, powerful beings discovered Lord Souls within the flame, and among them was the Witch of Izalith. Moving right into the Age of Fire, she and her daughters became absolute masters of fire sorcery, actually using it to help defeat those dragons. But as the first flame began to fade, we hit the dawn of chaos, where the witch attempted something totally unprecedented, creating a literal duplicate of the first flame.
Which brings us to Section 2. The witch's ambition, desperation versus hubris.
Now, what's really interesting here is the massive lost in translation reveal. The common Western narrative tells us that as the first flame was dying out, the witch panicked. She acted out of pure desperation to keep her world alive, made a terrible mistake, and accidentally destroyed her city. But the original Japanese script paints a completely different picture. While the English localization implies a desperate attempt where she simply failed to control the flame, her own daughter Kolana specifically calls her mother's actions an arrogant ambition. She wasn't panicking at all. She was conducting a highly calculated, ambitious scientific endeavor to create a brand new flame that specifically birthed life. And the kicker, she actually succeeded. She created a life-giving fire, but the collateral damage was just monstrous, literally warping her and her daughters into the bed of chaos.
Section 3. A demon civilization, a functioning society. Because the witch's experiment actually worked in creating life, the demons spawned by this new chaos flame weren't just some chaotic mistake meant to be exterminated. Once the flame of chaos stabilized, it began producing a fully functioning demon society. Let's rapidly deconstruct this myth of the feral monster for a second. Think about it. The Capra demon doesn't just attack wildly. He actually has the intelligence to train wild dogs and command human thieves, basically running the lower undead burg like a mob boss. The demon fire sages aren't mindless beasts either. They're the first demons who served as highly respected priests using original fire sorceries. There was even a formal pact sealing them off from the outside world. That implies diplomacy. At one point, the demon ruins were a thriving civilization where humans and demons actually coexisted under the rule of the witch gods. They had a real, structured hierarchy. Section 4. The Daughters of Chaos, and the heaviest price.
Every civilization built on unchecked ambition has its tragic figures, right? And for Izalith, the absolute heaviest price was paid by the witch's own daughters, who were standing at the very epicenter of this arrogant experiment. Once again, the translation changes everything. In English, we're told the flame of chaos engulfed the mother and sisters, molding them into deformed creatures. It makes them sound like these passive, horribly mutated victims. But the original Japanese text, it states they were made into a seedbed for grotesque life. Actually, scratch that. It's more like they were structurally repurposed. They became the literal foundation, the soil and roots that birthed the entire demon race.
Only one daughter entirely escaped this fate, and that was Kolana. But her survival came with profound psychological weight. Just listen to her original Japanese dialogue. I abandoned my mother, younger sisters, all of them, and ran away. And now I'm a coward who claims to atone for the sin. Kolana is dealing with absolutely crushing survivor's guilt. She fled her family's arrogant experiments and has literally spent 1,000 years sitting in a swamp, feigning ablution, completely unable to face the horrors her family became.
Now, contrast Quilana's guilt with this devastatingly tragic reality from her youngest sister, who we know as the Fair Lady. The Fair Lady and her sister Quelaag fled the core of Izalith, but they were still transformed into half-spider demons. Out of this incredible, deep compassion for the plagued citizens of Blighttown, the Fair Lady swallowed their toxic pus to save them. Now she's blind, immobile, and deathly ill, serving as a secondary seedbed, producing stillborn eggs. She whispers into the dark, "All this time, the eggs hurt. I'm sorry, big sister." It's just a heartbreaking display of agonizing physical devotion to her sister's plan to somehow sustain their people. And this brilliantly illustrates the true nature of Quelaag, the boss you have to fight to ring the second bell. The Western myth portrays her as this screeching, mindless monster, but in cut Japanese dialogue, her motives are crystal clear. She views the player as a new sacrifice. She is actively harvesting the humanity of adventurers to use as topsoil, literal fertilizer to ease her sister's suffering and keep their demon race alive. She isn't a beast. She's a fiercely protective older sister executing a desperate agricultural harvest on human trespassers.
Section 5. The Art of Pyromancy, a Dangerous Legacy. You see, the destruction of Izalith wasn't just the birth of demons. It was the birth of an entirely new magical art. If you've played the game, you probably think of pyromancy as just a combat mechanic, right? Hitting a button to throw a fireball at enemies. But the lore redefines it completely. Pyromancy is a profound philosophical concept. As Quilana's pupil Salaman explained, we are born into the dark, and we are warmed by fire, but we cannot actually touch it. Pyromancy is the primitive embodiment of life's intense longing for that fire. Only those who are deeply captivated by the very flame they cannot hold are able to harness part of its primal power. It's an art intimately tied to human nature and desire itself. So, the crucial point is, why did Quilana, the sole survivor, decide to teach this incredibly dangerous art to humanity in the first place? Well, she didn't do it to just give them weapons. She simplified her family's ancient chaos magics into pyromancy and taught it to Salaman so that humanity would learn to fear the flame. She watched her mother's arrogance literally consume her entire family. Her teachings are a direct response to that hubris, a dire warning to humanity, brilliantly disguised as magic, to never lose their fear of the fire, lest they lose themselves. Which brings us to a final, pretty haunting thought. The Witch of Izalith is remembered as this catastrophic failure because her arrogant ambition to sustain an age of fire ended up sacrificing her entire family, turning them into fuel for demonic civilization. But then you look at Lord Gwyn, the supposed hero of the gods. He sacrificed himself, his knights, and manipulated humanity to link the first flame and unnaturally extend his own age. If both of these leaders sacrificed absolutely everything and warped the world just to keep the fire burning, was Gwyn's noble linking of the fire really any different from the witch's tragedy? It's that cyclical, tragic nature of ambition that truly defines this universe. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep questioning the lore you think you know.